Hello everybody and welcome back for some weekly VR news. As always, I am Teir 1 and this is your channel for everything VR related. We have a lot of really interesting topics to go over today, including how John Carmack tried to make Teem Beefs ports official games, an update from the now defunct studio Ready at Dawn, some new games have been announced for the Quest 3 and PlayStation VR 2, and Palmer Luckey is now back in the XR industry, working on some augmented reality headsets for the military. Now there are of course links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead, but before we jump in, this video is brought to you by my long-term sponsor, Kiwi Design. If you need any accessories for your VR headsets, go check out Kiwi Design right now. I've tested tons of different Elite straps with battery packs, and the Kiwi H4 Boost is hands down my favorite. It comes in a standard and Halo strap variant, and can deliver up to 3 hours of additional gameplay. So go click the link down in my description, and don't forget to use discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support my channel. Okay, so let's start things off with the check-in, and that's what exactly have I been up to in the VR industry. As of right now, I'm trying to get back to the games I didn't finish. It's a little bit of a quiet time for VR, so I'm finishing up Behemoth, and I do jump into Asgard's Wrath and stuff every once in a while. The games that I missed, I'm just jumping back into. Now, I did want to talk about one thing that I've noticed. When I start spending a lot of time in the Quest, the graphics start to fade away, and they don't bother me as much. But I've been in the PlayStation VR and PC VR for mods lately, and when you spend a lot of time in that and jump back to the Quest, you feel like someone rubbed Vaseline on your eyes. So I kind of understand where both parts of the community are coming from. I know when I talk about some Quest games, people are like, oh my god, they're so ugly, it's PlayStation 3 graphics, you gotta be a meta shill to enjoy those games. And I kind of see it when I make the immediate jump, but when I'm spending a lot of time in the Quest, all that fades away and I enjoy my VR games. But when you're making that jump back and forth, yeah, it's there. And I had to mention it because I've been spending a lot more time in PC VR and PlayStation VR 2 lately than I've done in probably the last 6 months. And ooh, you feel that. But let's get into this week's new releases. And the first and only title I have scheduled to release this week is the early access version of the military sim shooter Teir One Direct Action. If you're not familiar with this title, it comes from the original creators of another military sim called Onward. They're striving for authentic military mechanics, and in early access we'll see familiar game modes like Sabotage and Team Deathmatch. Early access will be available for the metaquest starting on the 20th, and it's planned to eventually come to all their major platforms sometime later this year. Now another early access title making its way onto the metaquest 3 is the horror-themed shooter Into the Radius 2. The Steam early access version of this title has already made $3 million in revenue, and if you're not familiar with the series, it's a horror-themed survival shooter set in a creepy dystopian world that truly excels at environmental storytelling. The sequel plans to once again throw you into that world, continuing the game's storyline, but also adding co-op functionality this time around. So if you found this world to be a little bit too creepy to handle alone, don't worry, you could bring a buddy as backup, giving you some extra time to run away as they're getting killed. Now moving into game updates, unexpectedly, after a year with no changes, Onward is now getting a major overhaul. Version 2.0 is being called their biggest update ever, which includes a massive graphical overhaul, a new operator system with 20 characters, plus some other additional content. Now personally, I thought Onward was dead. After major layoffs at Downpour Interactive, their CEO leaving, I thought the studio was basically gone, and it's been a year without any updates. Now I know there is a small but extremely dedicated fan base for this title, the people that, like the cult following, they love this game, they still play it all the time, but it's not super popular like it once was. So I honestly thought it was dead. Seeing a major update, definitely a surprise, and I'm gonna have to jump back in. Now another title planned to get some graphical updates is the Quest version of Alien Rogue Incursion. This game released last week for the Quest 3, and you most likely heard less than stellar reviews. I personally didn't cover it because I didn't have a lot to say. It was still the same game I played on PlayStation VR 2, just now it was really ugly. Some of the gameplay enhancements that they added into the PC and PlayStation VR 2 versions did make it into the Quest release version, but there's still some serious performance and graphical issues that need to be worked out, and lucky for us, they have a major patch coming in the very near future. Now if you're sitting there wondering, well, they're able to push out a patch so quick a week after release, why wasn't it just in the normal release? And that's a very good question, but sometimes you just got to jump through a lot of hoops to set up your release date on Meta, and then when your release date is locked in, you can't make any changes for a certain amount of time. So you have to wait for the game to come out and then get your day one or week one patch ready. Kinda sucks, but that's how it is. And I want that stable release out there. Stable. I just hate the fact that when it comes to video games, we rarely ever get the best first impression. Could you imagine going to see a movie, you watch the movie and some of the CGI is meh, and they're like, don't worry, next week the movie's gonna have the updated CGI. Yeah, that's a joke. I don't know how we allow it in this industry. Now, a new update that I'm even more interested in is the additional level coming to Action Hero. This spiritual successor to Super Hot is absolutely fantastic, and that Action Hero setting truly adds so much to the original formula, so I'm expecting a new style of level to give it a completely different feel. This time it's taking on a horror theme, so I can't wait to see what they have in store for us. And speaking of horror games, it's the perfect time to jump into some new title announcements, but there is some overall confusion if the new Five Nights at Freddy's is actually coming to the PlayStation VR 2. The game was showcased in the latest Sony State of Play, and a blog posting said it would be coming to both PlayStation 5 and the PlayStation VR 2 in June, but that post was quickly modified to remove any mention of PlayStation VR 2. Now, I'm assuming this means that the VR version won't be ready in June and we'll get it at a later date, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. Now, the State of Play also gave us another first look at the super creepy Midnight Walk. This was previously announced to be coming to both flat screen and VR, and that truly unique claymation style looks absolutely terrifying, so as long as it's ported well, I bet this will be one hell of an experience in VR. It's giving me some Nightmare Before Christmas vibes, and I have to say I'm extremely intrigued for this one. And another truly interesting experience that we got from the State of Play is Dreams of Another. This is a third-person adventure exploration title centered around the theme of there is no creation without destruction. Now, watching the trailer, I have no idea what the hell I'm looking at, but I will say it definitely has its own unique sense of style. Well, let's move into some of the most interesting stories I heard all week, and we have one for Ready at Dawn and another for Teem Beefs ports. Starting with Ready at Dawn, if you're not familiar with the studio, they gave us the absolutely fantastic Lone Echo series. They also gave us Echo Arena, which was like the only major VR esports title. So obviously they were a beloved studio, and they actually started before VR. They had some big titles. They worked on the God of War games for the PlayStation Portable. They had their big title, which was the Order 1886. So they were a fairly big, fairly prominent studio, and they decided to move all into VR. And what they did was extremely impressive. Now, at one point in time, Meta absorbed them or acquired them. And we thought, okay, we're going to see Lone Echo come to the Quest, which never happened. And then we're kind of waiting to see what we're going to get out of the studio. And besides turning Echo Arena into a live service, which I always heard they were never big fans of at Ready at Dawn. They never wanted to work on a live service game. Besides that, we never got anything, which is the biggest disappointment. Well, we have recently heard from them, and it turns out they were supposedly working on like a massive, revolutionary VR game, but Meta just slowly dwindled them down to nothing. They said they also had a lot of conflicts working with Meta, something that I personally heard. There was a lot of pushback from Ready at Dawn because they didn't want to work on a live service game, something that Meta was making them put a lot of time and effort into. They wanted to work on a new IP, and then they're working on this massive new project. Meta is not really, interested in PC VR anymore, and they're also just slowly dwindling down the studio until, in their words, they really couldn't get anything done. Now, what actually transpired is probably somewhere in between that and, Meta's version that they were, not useful and just a waste of money. Somewhere in between is what really happened, but it is a shame. Ready at Dawn was absolutely amazing, and I wish we could see this project they were working on, but it's never going to happen, unfortunately. Now, another really sad aspect is the fact that John Carmack was really impressed with the Teem Beefs ports of games like Doom, Quake, a lot of the original first-person shooters they brought over to VR, and he was trying to get them to be official ports. He was working really hard for the license. He was promising 1 million in sales. Like, that's how much he believed that these games would sell in VR, and he couldn't make it happen. So this is just another one of those examples of, oh my God, why the hell didn't people listen to John Carmack? Like, he seemed to always be right, at least in terms of what gamers are looking for and what excites them. Maybe it's not the best overall direction for the industry and how to make the most money, but he was always pushing for what we really wanted, and it's sad that this didn't happen. Maybe it's something that could happen again in the future. Flat to VR Studios can pull it off, But what a disappointment that those weren't made into official titles, because then they would be in the hands of a lot more people. If you haven't tried those ports, do it. I know you're going to have to deal with side quests and you're going to have to jump through some hoops, but trust me, it is worth it. And today's final story, Palmer Luckey is back in the XR industry. Now, if you're not familiar with Palmer Luckey, he was the original founder of Oculus before it was acquired by Meta, or back then when they were still Facebook. Now, previously, Microsoft had a contract with the US military to develop some AR devices, but things were not working out well. Not only was this project making soldiers nauseous, it was also putting them at a greater risk. So don't expect to see AI augmented soldiers in the near future. This is still very much a work in progress, but it's something that the Department of Defense obviously wants to pursue. There's a lot of potential benefits here, and it's most likely eventually going to happen. If the technology is not ready yet, give it a few years and we'll definitely see it. And that right there was today's video. If you guys enjoyed it, you know what to do. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.